I think, Sophie, you're very much a part of this kind of animistic renaissance, but it's so important to realize that animism goes hand in hand with a particular kind or style of culture. Yes, indigenous, and as diverse and divergent as the various place-based indigenous cultures of this world are, there's this weird commonality, this sense that everything is alive, that everything has agency. But when we're speaking of indigenous cultures, place-based, we're by and large speaking of deeply oral cultures, that is, cultures that developed and thrived in the absence of any highly formalized writing system, or a writing system that was tightly coupled to their spoken language. Oral cultures, cultures of orality, seem to be far more embodied, and one is experiencing the world with one's whole animal organism, not just as a mind that is stuck inside a skull, but the body itself is this kind of magical creature that experiences or encounters the world as alive through and through, a sense that each thing has its interior animation, its pulse, its rhythm, its dynamism, its way of dancing into the present moment, because that's the way our animal body experiences the world in the absence of intervening technologies, including that old technology of the written word. When texts are not coming between us and the animate earth, the earth itself is speaking. Everything speaks in a deeply oral culture. Yeah, there's this remarkable intimacy between language and the land because everything is expressive. Everything speaks, though most things don't speak in words, but all things have the potential for meaningful utterance. And human language, this verbal thing, is simply our part of this much wider polyphonic conversation going on between all the beings, not just other animals, plants as well, but not just animals and plants, but also the rocks, also the winds and the weather patterns, also, the mountains and the rivers, and even dry riverbeds. Everything is expressive, everything speaks. And so, all the languages that we now speak originated in a context of orality in their deep origins, which is to say, our languages were born in a kind of call and response, not just with other humans, but in a kind of call and response with everything, with a speaking world. And there are so many ways to illustrate this. But anyway, let me jump and just say, writing interrupts this. Writing intersects and interrupts this experience of a world all alive, awake, even aware, but of a world that speaks. And different writing systems, I shouldn't, be speaking of writing as one thing, different forms of literacy, different styles of writing do this in very different ways. If we look at the more pictorially derived writing systems of China, the ideographic script there, but also, of course, the more pictographic scripts or hieroglyphics of Egypt or of the Maya, we are speaking of sign systems that include, yes, human forms and shapes derived from human implements, houses, but also they are interspersed with shapes, written characters, sort of stylistically derived from the moon, from images of other animals, felines, sunrise, a tree, rainfall and clouds, frogs. So the person reading such a text is continually reminded of language's link to a much more than human world of voices. And it's as if the written characters function as windows opening onto that more than human world that still speaks. But with phonetic writing, with an alphabet, like most of us now use, the written characters no longer function as windows. It's like you see the letter B and you go, buh. You see the letter C, you go K. The letters refer you right back to your own face. Rather than windows opening onto that wider landscape, the letters of an alphabet function like mirrors, reflecting the human form back upon itself. It's only as the alphabet spreads into a previously oral culture, usually carried by missionaries teaching the good book and wanting to teach people their ABCs so they can understand and perhaps begin to read the Christian Bible. Only then does that culture get this odd idea that language is an exclusively human power or property. Only in the after the advent and spread of the alphabet do we get this idea that language is, or meaningful speech is, an exclusively human power. And meanwhile, all the rest of the land begins to fall mute. It no longer speaks so vividly.
Thank you. I love that idea that alphabetic texts become the self-reflexive mirror, because they create this solipsistic relationship, because whenever in an oral culture you're talking, you're telling a story, you're speaking into a context with other people, where the whole world is liable to respond and to interrupt you and to change the entire course of events. And I'm also very interested in how in oral cultures, words are never objects. They never stay still. You say permanence, and by the time you get to the start of the word has decayed. That in a certain way, oral culture honors the cycles of decay that are natural to the world. And it's always open. One breath must decay to open up space for the next syllable. And that language is always adapting, and it's always a verb. It's a verb that syntactically strings us into relationship with the bird song, with the weather, with the composite of people who are there, with the sociopolitical, arrangement of that particular day and time. And that it's going to be very, very particularly tailored to a map of relationships rather than one static, ossified relationship between you and a page.